Hello and welcome to the PhD Life Raft podcast. I'm Emma Brzezinski and today I am talking to the magnificent Louise LePage. We are talking about managing the PhD with a chronic health condition. We talk about the challenges of that, but we also talk about ways that you could support yourself. So I do hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, Louise.
Hi, Emma.
Oh, right, we have to confess at the beginning that we know each other, and that I think you're brilliant. So we'll start with that. And it's such a gorgeous opportunity to have a chat with you. And I know because we're going to be talking about working with a chronic condition, and I know that is an experience that's shared by lots of people, and I know this is going to be a really useful one. So thank you for being willing to share your story around that.
You're very welcome. Thank you for asking me.
So first of all, I'm going to ask, like I do for everybody, to tell us your PhD story. So tell us a little bit about how was it for you?
Okay, so I'm actually going to go back a bit because to the masters and take it forward to the PhD, because I think with a chronic condition, it hits your identity quite hard. And actually, identity has been important to me coming through the masters into the PhD and beyond.
Right.
The identity of being an academic and the kind of expectations we put on ourselves. So I fell in love with academia when I was 33 and did my masters at University College Dublin, and I thought for the first time, I love this game of academia. I love this environment. I love inquiring and contributing to knowledge. And I think through that period, I knew quite early on I wanted to do a PhD. So there was a sense of sort of falling in love with myself through that process and being really keen to just jump straight into a PhD. So I was able to finish my master's in August and then start my PhD part-time, self-funded in January at Royal Holloway, which is how I know you, Emma.
Yeah.
And I sort of the subject was conceptually interesting to me, but it didn't feel particularly close. For me, it was more about wanting to do the PhD, wanting to to continue this kind of love affair with academia, as I felt it was at the time.
Yes.
So I found my topic, which was posthumanism, and wasn't quite sure what I'd do with it, but started part-time while working as an A-level and drama and theatre studies teacher at a sixth form college for a couple of years. Also teaching as a GTA on the undergraduate and master's programme, actually, at Royal Holloway through the period of being a PhD student. And it took me 5 years to do it. But in the middle of it, I had fertility treatment and had a baby and took a year off to do that. So it was a real roller coaster for me, the PhD. I started it in love with academia, kind of in love with myself, because I discovered, how great I was at this thing called academia. And then you start a PhD with all this confidence, and it gradually gets eroded, in my experience. Way. And, there are high points along the way. And so there are specific moments in a supervisor's, meeting, or at a conference with a specific paper, or at a progression chapter where you kind of go, oh, right, yeah, okay, so I can do this and I do love it. But the rest of the time, it's a real challenge. And I'm saying all of this, even as at that time, pre-ME CFS, which is the condition I now have. So even normally functioning, I found it very challenging. And I still remember actually at some point in my first year of PhD study, I emailed my supervisor going, I'm kind of getting the sense that I'm not very good at this. Do you think I should just give up? And to which he responded, oh gosh, no, I'm really sorry. I hadn't clocked that I haven't been sufficiently encouraging. Of course you mustn't. So it was that kind of up and down roller coaster until about the last year where I went, oh, this is what I'm doing. All right. I know exactly what I'm doing now and how I'm contributing. And now it's fun again. So yes, that was my experience.
Oh, well, I love that it's a love story. That's always good. But I think so many people have either sent that email or written and then deleted that email of, I'm not sure about this. I don't think I'm good enough and I might give up. So I think that kind of, and there is something really challenging about the PhD, as you say, come in all guns blazing and then things happen.
Yes.
And a lot happens while you were doing your PhD, a lot happens. But what we want to really focus on in this time together is the condition that you're now living with. And so I wonder whether we could start with, because of course you're still working as an academic and this has particular challenges, and you can understand then how this might impact if you're going through a PhD or indeed starting to launch your research career. So can you just start with explaining where you're at, what's going on, as much as you feel comfortable, obviously, and then how that relates to your academic work?
Yeah, of course. So I came down, I'd always struggled with bouts of fatigue, but they were always fairly short-lived. And there was anemia for a while and a number of things. So, but I didn't come down with ME/CFS until the end of my first year on my permanent contract at the University of York. And it came out of nowhere and it floored me. And so ME/CFS is a condition, and it's there's also the related condition of long COVID, where they don't know what the cause is, and there has been insufficient funding for research, and there's a whole gendered thing there because it's primarily women who suffer from it, and ME/CFS has a history of being kind of identified as hysterical, as hysteria. So so they don't know what the cause is. There's no positive diagnosis. So what it means is they test you for a number of conditions like diabetes and anemia and other such that cause fatigue. And once all of those been excluded, you are then diagnosed. But it means that there's no positive treatment protocol anywhere. Yeah. So you're on your own as a sufferer. So I think chronic conditions across the board are really challenging. Yeah. And I think academia is an incredibly challenging framework to find yourself living and trying to work with the chronic condition. But I think this is all compounded by the fact that ME/CFS doesn't have any kind of positive treatment protocol. I mean, GPs just don't know anything about it. And you'll find employers and supervisors and your peers, if you have ME/CFS or long COVID, really don't know anything about it. So you have to do your own research. You have to then also manage your life. And you have to manage other people's expectations. And if you're a PhD student, or in my case, an academic, but with a research mentor and a line manager, you have to manage their expectations of you. And you have to do this when you're tired. And this is, I suppose, tired is a really insufficient word for what we experience. So I try to explain it to people as kind of going, imagine how you feel, the kind of fatigue you feel when you are in bed with the flu and you can force yourself to the bathroom and to go and get yourself a glass of water. And you could even force yourself to try to read some kind of research. But everything in you is begging you not to do it. and your concentration is really not there. And I think this is one of the really big things with having ME/CFS is that it hits your cognitive capacities. So there's something that's very common with not everybody with ME/CFS has exactly the same symptoms, but it's very common that sufferers have what's called foggy brain, and it is quite a good metaphor in the sense it ranges from a kind of hazy mist through to a pea soupy fog, where you know that you know things. You know that there's, you know that playwright's name. You know that quote. You know that you understood that idea that you read half an hour ago. And you know all those ideas are there, but you can't reach for them because your memory is impacted. You can't synthesize ideas because you can't hold all the ideas in your head at one time. And it just slows you down. You can't, your work rate is just massively affected. And you have to come up with different reading strategies. You have to be patient with yourself. You have to push back when the university, or let's say a supervisor, says, I expect to be able to see that kind of output on that day. You have to start to learn to say deadlines have to be aims. They can't be deadlines anymore. And I think that over the last 7 years of having this, and I've got much better at communicating to line managers, research mentors, and conference organisers and editors in saying, when we set up a deadline, at saying, this is my aim, but there's a really high probability I'm going to ask you to move it. Is that a problem? And so it's continually just managing expectations.
I love this. I love this sense of deadlines as aims, because I think they probably always should be, right? What a healthy way to go forward, instead of having a deadline hanging over you, to have that as an aim. But this sense, like you say, of managing others as well as yourself, because as we were just saying before we started recording, that's obviously the thing you really want to be doing when you're feeling rubbish, is managing other people, advocating and educating. But that's what you're going to get involved in almost inevitably, because, as you say, people don't necessarily understand what's going on.
Exactly.
So this is really tricky, and especially if you're a PhD and you're just starting out and you're not so sure of yourself. And so I wonder if you could share some of the strategies that you've developed and some of the resources that you've found helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think something I reflected on really recently, when I had a meeting with the research mentor, and I reflected on this as I knew I was going to come on and talk to you, Emma, because I think it has parallels with a supervisor meeting.
Right.
I have been, now I'm in the privileged position of having been, I got my PhD in 2012. So I've been an academic for 14 years. And although my output isn't great, it's quite slow, it's quite modest. So I'm continually pushing back on that and feeling ashamed and saying, no, Louise, you mustn't feel ashamed. You live with it. Yeah, but it's really hard because we're all of us in academia there's expectations on being brilliant, so research excellence framework. We're looking to produce world-leading output with world-leading significance, originality, and and the rest of it. So when you have ME/CFS, a chronic condition, it's really hard to live up to that kind of expectation. So I sat down with my research mentor at the start of my current research leave, which is such a gift to be able to engage with my work and research in a really focused way. But I didn't want this meeting. I felt really anxious about it, despite being an academic of 14 years standing, right? And I was like, I'm a failure. I haven't fulfilled all the things that I said on my research application form. So, I'm going to get marked down and he's going to think I'm rubbish. And all those kind of things go through your head.
Yeah.
And actually, what was incredibly powerful for me was I sat down with my research mentor, who I like, respect, admire, and who I can feel I can be honest with. And I just said, this is where I'm at. This is what I've gone through. And it was incredibly powerful when I was at a very human level, admitting to my anxieties and frustrations and anger against this condition, which was stopping me from doing what I wanted.
Yeah.
He said, Louise, it's not your fault. None of this is your fault. So if you're going to get frustrated and angry about anything, focus it on things you can change. There's nothing you can do about this. It is not your fault. And for me, I mean, I nearly burst into tears because I can count on one hand how many times I've heard that.
Right.
Since having MECFS from anyone. And there's this expectation that, okay, you've got this condition, but you have to keep performing. You just have to, because that's what the university and everybody expects. And to have somebody turn around who I respect and admire and say, it's not your fault. And actually, I know that your work is variable because this condition means your work has to be variable, but at its best, it's excellent. And I just think, and it made me reflect, that actually a recommendation I have for anybody with a chronic condition, and particularly with MECFS, is to choose your supervisor very carefully. It will matter. I have a PhD student who has a different set of chronic conditions. And do you know what? Putting in applications for extending their submission date is a thing we do repeatedly. But it's a part of it. It has to be, right?
Yes.
So it's not, and they feel that they are a failure. And part of my job as their supervisor is to say again and again, you are not a failure. It is not your fault. And we find ways around it and through it. So I think that's my biggest tip. Find a supervisor who gets it and at a human level is not expecting a robot, who is able to see and understand, and I think understanding is crucial, the scale of the trouble, and who can recognize your strength, the strength that it takes, not only to do a PhD, but to do it with a chronic condition.
Yes.
So, and that way there's a feeling of feeling seen and understood. And it's kind of, after my research mentor, I almost skipped out of my room, because I felt seen, understood. And I'm like, yeah, I am good. I am good when I'm able to be good.
Well, I think this is the thing, isn't it? That as high achieving people, which we are as academics, we're going to be hardest on ourselves. And you're going to say to yourself, as you saying to yourself, I am a failure, I'm not good enough, which isn't true. As you say, you need someone in your corner, a champion who's going to say, you're brilliant. You're brilliant. And to really counter that voice, because we are smart people, we're going to really be very convincing to ourselves that we're rubbish, because we're going to have all the amazing arguments that we will deliver to ourselves and evidence that we will produce for ourselves of why we are rubbish. And we need somebody else equally smart to go, no, that's nonsense. I can see this. Look, let's look at this. And so I think, the people that you're surrounding yourself with, really, really important. And remembering it's possible to change supervisors too. That is possible. If you kind of feel like, actually, my needs have changed here, it's possible to shift. Anything else that you wanted to say?
I just think finally tips would be just, I know in notes that you exchanged with me prior to us meeting here, you said, I want to talk about managing the PhD. And I just think managing is a really key word when you've got a chronic condition. And I think it's really important to put yourself in the driving seat of your own research and your own projects, and it comes back to setting the terms of expectations around you, because otherwise there's a feeling of failure and everything feeling out of control that doesn't help anyone. And I think one final thing that's really helped me recently is I've accepted I have this condition. For a long time I kept thinking I was exceptional and that I would beat it alongside all the other people who have apparently beaten it. And this year I've got to the point where I'm like, okay, 7 years in, I think I have this, and I've tried everything and I've researched a lot. So I've joined Facebook community groups for MECFS, and it's been really powerful for me, Emma. Really powerful to just go, oh, my challenge is not just mine; it's shared, and it takes the wind out of it. It takes the fear and anxiety and sense of failure out of it. So that would be, I suppose, my final tip.
Oh, amazing. And I want to go back to the tip before in a minute, but that sense of acceptance is huge, right? And not easy. And as you say, that's a whole nother story in terms of moving towards acceptance, I'm guessing. But then that sense of community, which comes up again and again on the podcast. And I think there's lots of problematic things about Facebook, lots of problematic things, but social media can be a brilliant forum for finding those people. I know that I also am a member of a couple of groups that have literally been saviors in moments, that to have people who totally get it and you can just go there and vent and have people validate, witness you. What an amazing space to be in. And as you say, this is not my fight. You're not fighting on your own. You're not on your own. And there will be other people out there with resources and ideas and maybe having a better day than you on that particular day, so they can help you out that day and you can help them out another day. I think that is brilliant. And maybe in the show notes, we can have a list of some places that you would recommend to start with.
Yeah.
But then going back to this management, what you're talking about, managing the PhD, and seeing it as something to be managed rather than endured or conquered. This sense of, as you said, putting yourself in the driving seat of this, being CEO of your PhD, taking control, because control can be energizing in terms of like, I can control this bit, or I can control that. I can control my working patterns for today, or whatever it is that you can. That's energizing rather than this sense of like, I've just got to go through these things that other people are making me do, and that can be exhausting, can't it?
It absolutely can. Yeah.
So I think that sense of managing and finding ways to manage is really important too. And what you said really profoundly in terms of that, setting the terms of expectations, proactively setting the terms.
No, and I think that's hard. I do think, and I think it's hard enough for me now as a senior lecturer to do that, right, with my employers. But so as a PhD student, I can see how that would have felt really hard. But we do have that power. And it is your project as a PhD student. It is yours.
Yeah.
And I love it. And I have to say, it might be useful for PhD students listening to this to hear that. Now, me as a supervisor, I absolutely love it when a PhD student comes along and goes, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. Rather than, I mean, it's just so exciting. Yeah. So actually, there is nothing wrong in feeling, oh God, I've got this condition and I'm setting the terms and I should just be able to do it brilliantly and perfectly. That counters every single kind of capacity to be creative, to work happily, enthusiastically. It has to be your project.
Yes. And that sense of kind of really the proactive sense, rather than hiding away until it gets to the annual review and then you are full of anxiety and you're full of shame and all of that. Don't allow yourself to be in that space. Your supervisor, as you say, will welcome a conversation, really will welcome a conversation. And if you don't feel particularly comfortable approaching your supervisor, there may be other people that you can approach for support initially. But keep talking to people. Louise, you are awesome. And I know you have a YouTube channel, and we'll put that up in the show notes as well, so people can find that. You've already given us some tips. I'm well aware of that. But I want to get the money's worth. So I'm just going to ask if there's anything else that you'd like to add, or just to reiterate one of the tips that you've already given as we finish.
Oh, I have given all of my tips.
Right. Which your favourite?
My favourite, I think for myself, I think the supervisor relationship is really fundamentally important. And I think if you've got a chronic condition and you've got a supervisor who seems reluctant to engage at a human level, I would suggest they're possibly not the best supervisor for you, however brilliant they are. I think it's so, on occasion, I will have supervision meetings that are simply about talking as human beings about the challenges of working through specific contexts. And I think that's very important.
Amazing. Cue many applications to work with Dr. Louise LePage as a PhD supervisor. Just warning you there. Louise, thank you so much. And I don't even know what I'm trying to say here, but what I know in terms of your advocacy and your kind of public advocacy, that you're already out there supporting people. But thank you so much today for sharing your story. And I know this will be a real encouragement to lots of people. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you. And thank you for doing this podcast. I think it's brilliant. Thank you.
Bless you. Thank you all for listening.